Hello and welcome into the DePaul, a DePaul Hoops podcast. I'm Andy Thompson here with my co-host Nick Palazzolo, and together we're back again on the Big East Energy Network, here to bring you all the latest and greatest DePaul Blue Demons news. Now, yesterday, Nick had quite the scoop regarding DePaul's front court, and we're going to break that down and give you all the latest info there. We're also going to talk about tonight's game against Stonehill and discuss the women's opener against Valpo and how they improved from the exhibition. All that to come and much more on today's installment of the DePaul.
Look to his shot. Spins, fade away. Yes, sir. Chandler hits the three.
Oh, touchdown. Giving it up to Reed.
All right, welcome to the pod, and once again, want to give a huge thanks to the Big East Energy Network for having us on their space. Look forward to bringing you the latest DePaul news on their YouTube channel, as well as on Apple, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcasts. Now, as we discussed last episode, the DePaul Blue Demons in 25-26 have one of the deepest front courts they've had in quite some time, and as our own Nick Palazzolo broke yesterday, the front court just got even deeper. So, Nick, what'd you learn yesterday?
Yeah, it was interesting. So DePaul applied for and got a waiver for 7'2" center from Spain, Fabian Flores, who essentially what happened was he came over. Everybody's information said that he needed to academically redshirt so we can work on, because when international students transfer to state U.S. schools, right? There's every school system is a little bit different across the country. So some come in more advanced than others. Some come in with the equivalent of a GED, a high school diploma. Some don't. So there's always a little give and take. It's case by case basis. The information that pretty much everybody had was like, he just needs to academically redshirt, kind of get to that baseline level, and then kind of be eligible essentially. But then DePaul applied for a waiver because apparently they had different information, and the NCAA granted the waiver for Flores to make him eligible, essentially burning the red shirt, making him eligible immediately. And I will caution you, Chris Holtmann said it when he met the media today. Same thing I was told yesterday or the other day. Just because he's eligible doesn't mean he goes right into the starting five. Doesn't mean he is going to play right away. It doesn't mean he's going to play meaningful minutes. I think it'll really be a process to us seeing him on the floor. And the timing of this, Andy, was interesting. And
Agreed.
You and I were kind of talking about this. And I'll kind of go with, I was having a conversation about somebody this today. I was like, I knew something was weird, but I didn't know what. And I had no idea that it was regarding Fabian. Like, I genuinely didn't. Because when Chris Holtmann met the media in July, somebody asked him about Isaiah Medina. Basically said, the game is way too fast for him, right? Freshman, arguably a top 150, 175 freshman in the recruiting, in this year's recruiting class. Game's just, really fast for him. That's pretty normal for a high school for a freshman. And so then we follow back up at media day. So that was talked to Holtmann in July, said the game was too fast. Then we talked to him in early October, I think it was, maybe September.
Yeah.
And he was like, he's doing a really good job in practice. We need to see him practicing more. And which is interesting because he's essentially been there the whole summer. The school has started. You still need to see him in practice. So that's a little, again, just reading in between the lines, the signs were there for a potential redshirt. Again, the coaching staff isn't going to make that determination without Medina and his family and people he trusts. So then there was that aspect. But what was weird was, I believe it was last week, I asked Chris Holtmann straight up. I was like, do you have any news on a redshirt? Kind of expecting that that Medina would probably get one. Jonas Johnson, the preferred walk-on from DePaul Prep, Shout out to former Blue Demon Tommy Kleinschmidt, the head coach there at DePaul College Prep. I
Three
figured
consecutive state champions. Don't you forget it.
Oh, I know. I've seen them play. He is no joke there on the sideline.
No, so.
But I figured Johnson was going to get one. Again, preferred walk-on, end of the bench guy. Like, it just made a lot of sense. Like, no need for a preferred walk-on to burn a year of eligibility. That didn't make a lot of sense. So I figured him, but Medina was the interesting one. So, and Holtman said when I asked him about does he have redshirt news, he's like, no, but we'll have something after game 1. And I was like, okay, that's a little weird. Like, that's just a little weird because everything you have said, and again, it requires some reading in between the lines. It says that you are going to redshirt him, but you haven't done it. So then I kind of had this thought. I was like, what else is happening? Like, what else would cause? Because to the outside world, it was kind of a seemingly a relatively easy decision to redshirt. I think with Théo's emergence. I just thought everything we were told, especially, all the stuff in press conferences, it didn't make sense for him to burn the year of eligibility. And then, you find out, you start hearing things in some circles that is like, Fabian might actually play. And I was like, that's what it is. Like, that's why why there hasn't been any redshirt announcement. Because last year, with Nate Kasher and with Sekou Kana, it was announced they were going to redshirt after game 2. I think that was Prairie View A&M. So again,
Correct, yes.
Usually the first week of the season is when that stuff gets determined. But like I said, it was weird because everything that we were told publicly that it was pointing to a red shirt, and then to not announce it, I was like, there's something else here. And that final domino used to be Fabian. But again, not expecting him to play really anytime soon. Maybe some garbage time minutes if a game warrants it. But even then, I think you're going to prioritize Maker and Théo, just kind of getting a more extended run over Fabian. But Andy, just kind of what do you think as I kind of long way kind of how the reporting aspect went. But what do you make of the Fabian news?
So I think before I talk about what I want to make of this, I want to talk about what I made of Maker in his first game. Because he, you talk about how you want to give more of the floor to Maker, and he, in the 12 minutes he played against Chicago State, looked pretty athletic defending. Obviously, that is a team from the NEC, as we discussed, but he did look pretty athletic. Like, the defense has already come a little bit of a ways, even just from the Loyola game. And in that game, he had 3 points, 3 boards, and 2 really athletic blocks, including the second one, which from where I was sitting, and I think from where you were sitting, it looked like some air might have been taken out of the ball. Like, that was a proper volleyball.
That ball lost some PSI.
Yeah, that ball lost some air for sure. So I think you're going to clear the floor for Maker and kind of, as Chris Holtman's been saying, allow him to play more simple basketball. But I think what I make about the fact that Flores is eligible this year is really that whether or not, like you said, he plays significant minutes, which I'll be honest, I don't expect either unless it's the back end of a blowout and you just want to get him, just get him some run.
I think it's possible we get there. I just don't think it's anytime soon.
No, I agree. I would expect, like, there were people that we had both talked to who were like, oh, is he going to play even in the Emerald Coast Classic in Dessa at the end of this month? And that does not feel like a time he'll be getting any run. I would imagine some of the December bye games, you'll probably start to see him in some bigger stretches just to kind of get him some time on the floor. Sure. But what I do make of this is DePaul kind of lucked out here with the research and the information that they were able to get, because the team that nearly took Fabian in the early portion of the offseason, from my conversations with Armand over at PDT Scouting on X, the defending national champion Florida Gators very nearly ended up with him. They were hoping he would be able to fill kind of an Alex Condon role from when he first got there. Obviously, he's not going to be the same Alex Condon. He's not going to be able to, shoot with 3 the way Alex can, or he's not going to be as much of a rim defender necessarily, and he's not going to be as dynamic or mobile because Alex is 6'10", I believe, from Australia, and he's an integral piece of Florida's front court. But what they did hope is that they could develop him the same way they've developed Condon over a 3-year period now, and maybe get him to a point where he can start by the time he's a junior or a senior. But ultimately, there was some uncertainty. I believe what their side said was the finances didn't work out, or at least that's what we're being told. And so they ended up ultimately not taking him. And then both Ruben Chinyelu and Alex Condon, who were significant parts of their national championship front court, they're all coming back. They both pulled out of the NBA draft. So really, they would have had to sit him for a year, and they would have been filling a roster spot with somebody who wasn't going to play an integral role in the front court when you were going to have all those starters back. It didn't make sense. But now that DePaul's able to pick him up, you have somebody who there is legitimate high major upside here. And what I was told is that the redshirt year this year, which obviously he's now not going to take, he can get even more integrated into the team and the system by playing. But redshirt year or not, this was going to be the year he was going to adjust to the American basketball and kind of get familiar with playing in an American system, adjusting to the pace, getting his hands better around the rim, kind of learning how to move well. But once he's in the 26-27 season, which it sounds like he is going to be here for sure in 26-27, regardless of getting eligible this year or not, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds as though he will be able to start really moving his way up the ranks and playing more of a true backup role. And that's going to really help this team, especially as, a Twin Towers style offense continues to become more prevalent in college basketball.
Yeah, and I think we've hit on it a little bit, but I'll take it one step further. What Chris Holtmann said about Fabian today is that essentially he didn't get here until September. I think it was like the second week of September, maybe the first week of September is when he showed up on campus. So it's just like one of those things where it's like he didn't have a whole summer of workouts with the guys, with DePaul to learn. Again, I understand summertime workouts is just one of those things where it's like it's small incremental periods, you're capped on your hours for weeks, but that's essentially your install. What kind of offense do you want to run? What kind of defense do you want to run? Like ball screen coverages, like those kinds of things. And he wasn't here for that. So essentially, he has been a DePaul Blue Demon for 2 months, so about 9 weeks, and he has to learn. But he also hasn't been able to learn by playing. Because Chris Holtmann mentioned it today. He's like, we didn't know if he was going to play. Like, we kind of went into the year with the mindset of, he's going to sit, he's going to learn, really develop, kind of understand what we want to do, and then we'll, get going in 26-27. So what that means is they weren't going to give him meaningful reps. He's still going to get his reps like every backup player on teams, but there's a kind of a hierarchy. You get your starters reps, then you get like your core rotation pieces reps, and then it's kind of everybody else. And I'm sure he probably fell into that everybody else. And again, who are you going to, Banks needed reps, NJ needed reps, Théo needed reps, Jeremy Lorenz needed reps. It's just one of those things where it's like, he hasn't really played a lot of DePaul basketball. Regardless of practice, red shirt or not, like there will be time. And again, because of that, his conditioning level probably isn't great. Like, honestly, the first time we see him, it'll be like the last 2 minutes of a game just to kind of get his feet wet, soft landing, that kind of a thing. I think it'd be more likely when Big East play starts. Knowing that there's kind of like the weight lifted, that they can do a little bit more and slowly incorporate him more. But I don't know how likely that is. I think it all depends on health and everything else. But again, I'm not expecting him to play in, 25 games. I think maybe 10. I think 10's about where you would probably slot him in, maybe less. Again, it all depends on the ramp up, and I think that's really just kind of where we're at on Fabian.
No, I 100% agree, and I think you're right that maybe middle of Big East play, as if they're more comfortable with their lineup, maybe they'll start to be like, okay, we can afford to give him 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here. But I do think that the stretch of games that you're most likely to see him in once he's had about a month to acclimate himself is I think when we get to the Morgan State, Arkansas, Pine Bluff portion of the schedule, I think that's when you're most likely to see him play in at least 2 games, because obviously those are both teams that are ranked in the 300s on KenPom at the moment, and you're not really going to face, obviously Chicago State did give us a bit of a game. We'll get to that in a moment, but you're not going to face much resistance from teams at that level typically. And now that DePaul has gotten themselves to a point where they're no longer at that level, I think you can afford to play a guy like him, maybe 10 or so minutes in each of those games, just kind of get his feet wet and really see, even if the level of competition isn't that high, what does he have for us right now, and how much can we maybe build him in late January, early February, like you said?
Well, and the fascinating part, just kind of wrap this conversation up a little bit, but I think the interesting part is, again, you have NJ, who's your clear 5, and then you have Kaman. Kaleb's going to play the 4. Théo, probably a better 4 than he is a 5, but could see some 5 time. But Kaman, he hasn't played a lot of college basketball either. So it's like one of those things is like, you want to find times, but again, Kaman's actually been able to really practice and get some meaningful reps in practice. That's, Fabian's probably done a lot of scout team stuff, but not necessarily your actual practice reps. Again, that's another kid who just hasn't played a lot of college basketball. So again, that's another thing where NJ's you're obviously your starter, I think, and then the backups, again, they essentially just need to play. And again, are you going to cut into NJ's minutes a little bit earlier than you would just to get these guys experience? I don't know. And that's all part of the puzzle for Chris Holtmann and company to figure out.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right. And, I think one thing about that I'll say based on the conversations I've had, I think once Fabian is incorporated into the lineup, you're going to have to play him with a playmaking 4. He's not going to be able to be out there if there's 2 people who can't really move around that well in the paint, especially with him not being as developed of a college player. So I think the player that you'll end up seeing next to him a lot at the 4, because we kind of know he's a hybrid 4-5, you'll see a lot of Théo next to him, I predict. Because Théo is able to make cross-court passes. He can swing the ball. He can find people inside. He's able to be physical on the glass and save possessions and create new ones. So I just think you'll have to have somebody like Théo, who has really been breaking out these past few games, and he continued that trend against Chicago State. So why don't we kind of, I'll tip it off with the fact that Théo had career highs in both points and rebounds in just 14 minutes of play. He was 5 of 7 from the floor, had 12 points and 5 total rebounds, including 2 of them being offensive. And I just think you're continuing to see the emergence of Théo that neither of us really saw coming, but it's a welcome surprise for this team as they hope to climb up the rankings in the Big East.
Yeah, and I think, just kind of tying in our previous conversation already, I think that Théo's emergence, and again, I'm not privy to the redshirt conversations. I don't know what happened, so I will preface it with that. I think Théo's emergence has kind of made the decision to redshirt Isaiah Medina just a little bit easier, because coming into the year, I think, based on what we saw last year, I think we were trying to find playing time for Théo. And that was kind of our thought coming in before we've even saw a practice. I think that was kind of the thought there. And now Théo has really separated himself to being a vital rotation piece for this DePaul team. And I think if you're the coaching staff, honestly, again, I don't know this. I haven't talked to anybody about this. But I think his emergence has really made the decision just a little bit easier on Medina.
100%. And I think let's dive a little bit deeper into that Chicago State game. And real quick, while we talk about players who've redshirted and kind of the back of the bench, I do want to give a special shout out to Nate Kasher, sophomore Nate Kasher, redshirt freshman Nate Kasher. I can't believe I just did that. He made his first 2 points of his collegiate career and also grabbed a really nice rebound towards the end of that game. He made a pair of free throws, and it was just nice to hear, NJ afterwards and coach and everybody just getting hyped about it because, everybody talks about Layden, NJ, and CJ staying, and obviously, Théo stayed as well. But Nate was somebody who was on the bench the entire year, like you said, running scout team, and he did a really great job with that. The guys love him as a practice player, and it's really nice to see him getting minutes. So I just wanted to take a couple minutes to kind of shout out Nate because, his efforts that he pours into this team may not be noticed in a box score, but he does a good job day to day, and all the players love and respect him.
Yeah, shout out to Glenbrook South. Those northern burbs, they just keep grinding out talent.
All right. We get it, Mr. Stevenson. Anyway, the other thing I really want to talk about.
Time out. I hate Stevenson. I went to Warren. I hate Stevenson. All right. I just need that to be clear.
I'm thinking of a different member of our group chat who went to Stevenson. My apologies.
This is true.
Yeah, there's a lot of Northern Burbs people in there, as we know. So I think the other player that I want to talk about from that game is Kaleb Banks, because Holtman said some very interesting things today about him at the press conference, kind of talking about how he's taken a little bit longer to acclimate to DePaul's system, because the systems he was playing in previously, like under Mike Woodson in Indiana, obviously he was playing a significant amount of man-to-man defense. And then last year at Tulane, every single possession was zone. Just getting acclimated to a high major system once again and having more of a star role in that, I think is part of why we've kind of seen, I don't want to say stagnant's the wrong word, but we just haven't really seen him incorporate himself into the lineup early, I guess, as much as we would have thought in the offseason. But, I guess just take it wherever you want to go. But what did you kind of see from Kaleb in this first game that kind of you think he can build on in the future potentially?
Yeah, I think Caleb's in an interesting spot. Just, again, reading a little bit in between the lines, as I just kind of plug in my light here. There we go. Whoa, hello. Let there be light.
You just got really bright.
Yeah, sorry.
You're about to drop some wisdom on us. What do you have?
I don't know about that. God, that is bright. Sorry about that. But when you talk about Kaleb, right? When you ask Holtman about him, when I asked him about him at Media Day, first thing he brings up is his motor. Okay? We believe in the potential of the player, but we really need to work on the motor. Found that a little interesting. Then, when CJ Gunn falls out in the Loyola game, we asked Kaleb Banks after the game. He kind of found like another level, and it was kind of the next man up mentality. That was a little strange to me. Being a starter, a high priority transfer for DePaul. They probably had to outspend other power conference schools to get him. So again, a little curious that's the next man up mentality. And then today, you asked Holt about Kaleb, and it brings up his defense. This defensive thing you brought up was a little interesting to me. But defense is important, don't get me wrong. But I think we need to see growth offensively. I think that this offense will go when Kaleb Banks goes, because I think he will do a lot just to take some of the pressure off of NJ from around the basket. So I think that is really, really important when we're looking at it, and that's something we haven't seen yet. We've seen it in small spurts, but nothing in a big way that we kind of thought we could have. And every answer to me is just a little bit interesting. Just kind of, again, I could be reading way too much into comments and that kind of stuff, which is very easy for a journalist to do. But again, 8 points, 4 rebounds in 18 minutes. That's fine. But at some point, those numbers are going to have to be a lot greater than what they are. Again, I understand they've played one game. This is not a knock at Kaleb. Again, I just find the whole thing rather interesting, being he's probably one of your highest paid players.
Yeah, no, I would imagine so. But the thing I do want to shout out for him, though, is he was the only player in the game who drew more than 3 fouls, and he drew 5. So as he figures his way into the offense more, as both of us know he's going to do, because I want to be clear, like you said, this is not a knock on him. It's just I think a lot of people, when he committed, were expecting like day one he was going to be leading scorer, he was going to be making flashy play after flashy play. And he's kind of just been biding his time and figuring his way into the system, which I have no issues with. But right. I do like the fact that early he is drawing fouls, which if you look at the film from Tulane is one of the main reasons we brought him here, to kind of make the offense more dynamic and help with shooting free throws, because nobody on DePaul last year averaged more than 3 free throw attempts a game. And the person who averaged the most was Jacob Meyer. Who averaged barely 3 a game, and then the past 6 games, he didn't even play 10 minutes. So DePaul has struggled. They had some good free throw shooters like Troy D'Amico last year, but they just struggled to get there to begin with. So having Kaleb, immediately go out, first official game in a DePaul uniform, draw 5 fouls, that's really useful. He does convert on 6 out of 9 of those free throw attempts, but like you said, 1 of 4 from the field. So there are some little kinks to work out offensively, but I do like how he's kind of already asserting himself as somebody who's going to get the line a lot for this team, because that's a strength this team didn't really have last year. And now you add that piece to your team by having a guy like Kaleb on the floor in that.
And I think last year, again, this is not a knock on Kaleb. Again, offense is always going to be a little clunky earlier in the year.
Yes.
Maybe, but this is also like where expectations kind of hurt a player like Kaleb. In a way, maybe from myself, maybe from you, Andy, maybe just media in general, just preseason expectations. And then when you don't see it right away, it just kind of looks a little weird. But what I will say is last year there were times I felt like DePaul would get the opponent into the bonus, around that 10, 12-minute mark of the half.
If not earlier, yes, absolutely.
If not earlier. And then they just wouldn't take advantage. And I think that was a lot to do with the makeup of the team. They didn't really have that kind of slashing team. They had a couple guys, but nothing that was like they played a lot of perimeter offense. If we're being completely real, a lot of 5-out, like that kind of stuff. Swing the ball like that. That's really what they played. A lot of motion offense type of thing last year. This year they kind of diversified a little bit to the point where getting to the free throw line has obviously been a priority. Whether intended, unintended, not really sure, but it's certainly a priority. Given again 35 free throws attempted in a game against Chicago State. Again, Chicago State was giving DePaul a lot of problems with the press that we can get to in a little bit if you want. But it's just like one of those things where we look at it and it's like, is this something we didn't see a whole lot of last year? And again, the Loyola exhibition, it's an exhibition. That was its own thing.
That game was an anomaly.
But DePaul shot 50 free throws. Whether they were, like, I would be hard pressed to say in that game, there were a lot of calls that I had a hard time arguing. Like, again, you're going to get your handful, but I didn't think it was like an obnoxious amount. But 50 free throws, I think that kind of foreshadowed in a way. Again, it's an exhibition. Don't want to look too much into the box score. But I think you want to see that a little bit more.
For sure. And no, so the halftime score, if I'm not mistaken, the halftime score was 46-21 per the box score we have here. And immediately coming out of halftime, you mentioned that the offense is going to look a bit clunky early. And I think the stretch where it looked the clunkiest was probably midway through the second half when Chicago State, they come out of the locker room and they hit DePaul with what was one of the program's two Achilles heels last year, in my opinion. I'm sure you would agree. And that's with the press. They were really aggressive, trapping and double teaming immediately at half court. They picked up at half court very well. And we just had some issues. Like we had 4 turnovers in the first half and then 9 in the second half. And Chicago State was, forcing us into some uncomfortable situations. And they were, they were really giving us some issues that you wouldn't think a team that ranks in the 360s on KenPom would. But, that's the kind of lesson that I think wake-up call that DePaul definitely needs early because the press was an issue last year. And I think that will continue to hurt this team. But I also think they have the horses to be able to work around it because Layden Blocker, as we talked about today, he's adjusted to the point guard role very well. And I think he's kind of starting to feel more confident running the offense. You've got Brandon Macklin, who in this game has 6 assists, 2 turnovers. He actually leads the team in assists even over Layden. So you've got pieces that are much stronger, much more physically capable than last year to be able to quarterback the press and kind of, move the ball around. But I thought it was good that DePaul faced that this early and got a test like that because you still have time to work on it before you start facing some of these teams like Northwestern and the teams down in Destin. They're going to, if you want to build a resume that's going to move you potentially towards the bubble, those are the kinds of games you want to be ready for. And I think Chicago State provided a good test there.
Yeah, I think you can kind of look at that 2 ways. One, you want to see it early so you can better prepare for it. But 2, you're putting it on film that you're struggling with it. So, again, I think it's kind of that double-edged sword. Because, again, when we see St. John's, that's the first Big East game, right?
At St. John's and then home UConn. That's what the hardest 2-game stretch anybody has in the Big East because nobody plays those 2 teams consecutively.
And that Pitino is just going to be licking his chops to press. We saw it last year.
He always is. He always is.
Again, that's what makes Pitino. But I think, again, DePaul really needs to get that figured out. And I think by showing that on film early, I think they'll see it more and they can adjust more. So it's kind of that double-edged sword in a way. You struggle with it, but you have an opportunity to get better with it. But again, right when that December 16th or whatever the hell the game, against the Red Storm is, I guarantee you will see the press early.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think real quick to wrap up the Chicago State talk, the last thing I want to say is it was really nice, and we talked about this too at media availability today, that it was nice to see Ilya kind of finally work his way into the offense after obviously both were exhibitions. He's, as we talked about last podcast, excuse me, he's still getting used to the American style of basketball. He's getting used to adjusting to playing in Chris Holtman's system, getting a lot more used to, the offense, getting around in space. But it was nice to see him go 2 of 3 from behind the arc and 2 of 3 in the game, in fact, and just kind of get himself kind of acclimated. And one thing that I thought was interesting today that we talk about with Chris Holtman that he said was, last year they really challenged CJ Gunn to rebound a lot more. And he averaged 4 a game on the season, and his career high was 4 in early January. He made some real strides in there. I thought it was interesting that they were saying they really wanted Ilya to pick up his rebounding efforts a little bit, and they're going to challenge him to do that, because obviously that means that they're going to emphasize the glass this year in a way that, again, this team last year did not necessarily have the horses to do. I just thought it was encouraging to hear that they're excited about his progress offensively. They love the way he's been shooting the ball in practice, but I just like that they're challenging him to focus on more facets of his game besides just being a three-point shooter, because that's going to make him a lot more valuable for us down the stretch when he's got the experience against some of these by-game opponents to kind of build the confidence up that, yes, I can do this. This can be a part of my game as well. And then he'll be a much more valuable player for us later on in the season when he's got those reps in game to kind of help out his confidence.
Yeah, and it's kind of what I talked about the other day. I was like, he just needs to see the ball go in the basket. Again, from everything we were told, like, the skill is just too good to pass up. So, like, again, the shots are gonna fall. But again, for me on Ilya, on Miljasevic, like, I really think that it'll be interesting to see his development on the defensive end of the floor, because Chris Holtman has to find a way. His offense is too good to not play, but his defense, I don't think, is at a point to where you can leave him out there, give him starters minutes. So I think as he gets more and more comfortable, we'll start to see that a little bit more, but that's kind of what I'm watching for with Ilya going forward here.
No, 100%. I think the physicality of getting some of those rebounds over taller guys is going to help him out with maybe not fouling as much and being more willing to press the ball and kind of, help the team out defensively. Sure. So I want to talk about Stonehill for a couple minutes and then just briefly talk about the women, because they had a really nice performance after an admittedly shaky one against Milwaukee. But first, I kind of want to talk about Stonehill, because Chris Holtman was obviously, he's never going to talk down on a team. He's never going to take a team lightly. But even over, when we talked to us about Chicago State, he was very complimentary of Stonehill and some of the pieces they have. So what do you think we're going to see in that game that's going to kind of help DePaul figure themselves out even more than they already have?
Yeah, that's a good question. Here's how I see this game going. I think DePaul will be fine. I think DePaul wins this game. But I think with how you are, if you're Stonehill, as I just kind of gather my thoughts here. Again, Chris Holtman seems really worried about their perimeter shooting offensively. Like, that was, he made a big point. 2 big points he made about Stonehill: their size and their perimeter shooting. And I think that's the kind of matchup for DePaul that Stonehill could very easily punch DePaul in the mouth early, and then the shot will wear off, and then DePaul will obviously, hopefully, beat DePaul, and then just kind of go take care of business from there. But that's how I could really see that game going. Just because of the way Holtman talked him up. Again, they have some statistical unicorns on their team. Like, again, I understand Ken Pom ranks them as 330. Like, I understand that. But again, Chicago State, Stonehill, they'll probably be bottom 15 teams in terms of Ken Pom. Again, I think that's just the reality of the situation. But I think DePaul, you just really, really need to take care of business. And perimeter defense is kind of something we were concerned about, especially in Loyola. It's gotten a little bit better. But that's really what I'm watching for, because what Stonehill apparently does really well is shoot from perimeter. I think a struggle for DePaul has been guarding at the perimeter at times. So I think that's kind of where this game goes.
Yeah, for sure. I just took a look at Stonehill. They shot. So Chris Holton was talking about their perimeter shooting. They shot 36% from three. They did beat a non-D1 school 100-48, but in that game they shot 36% from three. And they had a senior guard by the name of William Batchelder who went 4 for 4 from beyond the arc. He also went 5 of 5 from the field, had an assist, and he's a really effective player for them as a senior. They've also, just like DePaul, they do have a core coming back. They have a trio of players who are back in Herman Kofi, in Chase Stinson, and also in a guy with the last name Muser. I can't pronounce the first name. But they've also got a returning core coming back. And that Muser, he did not play in the first game, and people don't really know why, but he is rostered. And so Stonehill does have a couple of players who are familiar with each other, familiar with the system, and they played at a high level in the NEC. And so you combine a team that's kind of familiar with each other, has that core the way DePaul does, and they're good on the perimeter. That's a team that DePaul is going to need to be able to take care of business against. And so I just think that it will be a good test, like Chris Holtman said, to really work on our perimeter defense ahead of playing a high major team the following Friday in Northwestern.
Yeah, and we were kind of talking about it on the way to the media room. We won't really know how good DePaul's perimeter defense is until they play Northwestern. I think that's just a fact, just the step up in class of opponent. But I think the Stonehill game's kind of a sneaky measuring stick game, just in that way, because they're 9 of 25 from three. As you Batchelder, or is that how you say it? Batchelder, 4 for 4, as you just said. It's just like one of those things. Kofi is going to take a lot of threes. He shot 7 of them. It's just one of those things. It's like it's a good test. It's a good early soft test. It's a good stress test just to kind of see where they're at.
Exactly. Chicago State was a stress test with the press. You kind of got to see, okay, this is still something the team struggles with. We got time to pull ourselves out of it. We've got film on it now. We know what to work on in practice. And Stonehill, Chicago State had a shooter or two, but the problem is their best shooter was 5'9", so he just wasn't going to be able to get much off against a DePaul team that was just bigger and stronger than Chicago State in every single aspect of the game. Right. But with a team like Stonehill, where you do have some athletes who are pretty tall, you've got several guys on that team who are 6'8", 6'9", and have experience playing with that team as well. One of them being a junior. Obviously, you've got some players on that team who have seen more college basketball. They're able to use their physicality a little bit better, and they are going to be able to get the ball outside to some of those shooters like Batchelder, who can get pretty hot from beyond the arc. So that'll be a good test. And I think another team that got a good test, but a little bit earlier than we probably thought, that would be the women's team. They beat Valparaiso by 38 points, tying the largest margin of victory, I believe, at Wintrust Arena, if I have it correct. That may be wrong. You'd have fact check me on that. But what I do know is that in the game against Milwaukee the week prior, they had a 22-9 lead in the end of the first quarter, and we were kind of like, okay, the women are going to be able to pull away, despite the fact that they're missing Meg Newman and Kate Clark for the better part of the non-conference portion of the schedule, at least. And then that game, DePaul is down 40-35 at the half. Milwaukee shoots 9 of 16 from three. DePaul only goes 5 of 18 from three. The Blue Demons do squeak out a win in that game, 77-73. And obviously, exhibitions don't mean much. There were quite a few fouls in that game. I believe there were 51 in total that were called. So just like the Loyola men's game, there were some anomalies in that game. Sure. But what that game did show us is that, this team, just like last year with some of their injuries, they're going to sorely miss Meg Newman and Kate Clark. And you just really don't know to what extent until they play. Like, they play at UNLV on Saturday, and they're usually a pretty good team over there. But I do want to shout out some performances in the Valparaiso game that I do think give you some encouragement for, even though this team was missing 5 players on Tuesday, in addition to Newman and Clark, you had, Xavier transfer, Isaac Mayo was out. Devin Hegman was out as well, and those were 2 of your guards you brought in to have a lot more experience and kind of help out, the younger guards, and Allie Tim and Elena West, who pretty much missed all of last year with their own injuries. And you were also missing Shakara McCline, who was a guard from East St. Louis, who has experience playing with DePaul. She knows the system, and she's able to kind of provide a backup spark off the bench, although she does project to have a starting role in some of the absences of some of the other players. But I think what you did see in this game that you like, first of all, Allie Tim, just laughably good from beyond the arc. She was 8 of 10 from 3. She also had 4 steals in that game. And then you also had Elena West, who has just, I think, been a revelation early. She didn't play basically at all last year. And in this game, she had, let me look, she had 8 points, 7 rebounds, 5 steals, 3 assists. And I believe she stuffed the stat sheet. And she's going to kind of be your primary point guard. There was a little bit of foul trouble for her midway through the second half, but she got herself out of it and she finished the game really well. I just think the Valparaiso game after the scare against Milwaukee kind of built up a lot of confidence for this team to see that, you can beat an opponent by a significant margin even when you're down, so that when those players do come back, you're going to feel more confident and you'll have a deeper rotation to kind of play with after, Milwaukee, gave you a real test from beyond the arc and you had to work on your own perimeter defense there as well.
Yeah, and I think it was like Divine Saint of Holy Angels or Divine Savior of Holy Angels for Allie Tim. That's where she went to high school. I'm pretty sure she has her high school 3-point record in 4 years in terms of made threes. And that's something that I think DePaul found really enticing when they went and got her in recruitment. And I think that is, she's gonna, again, her being down for the year last year was something that was something that they really missed. Kate Clark being down also hurt, but essentially your offense was Jory Allen, and you had 0 perimeter shooting at all.
Other than Taylor Johnson-Matthews, that is correct, who is now at Clemson.
Right. But again, it's just like, one guard isn't really going to change a whole profile of a team offensively. But if you're DePaul women's basketball, Allie Tim coming back is huge. Elena West coming back is huge. I think those are 2 of the most underrated aspects of the game, just because, again, they just give you a little bit something. I think Elena West, they really expected to play a lead guard role as a freshman, and it just
100%.
never really happened. And now you're starting to see why. This year, Valparaiso, the exhibition games, have really proven that. Allie Tim, again, she just brings that perimeter threat. I mean, 8 of 10 from 3.
8 of 10 probably isn't going to happen for a while, if at all.
No, again, it's not. But it's just insane as it is.
Yeah. And the other player I do want to give a big shout out to in that game, Kate Novick had a big game, but the one that I came away most impressed with, and that I'd been super high on her even towards the end of her freshman year, that'd be Nataya Nelson, who had her first ever, career double-double. She sets a new career high in points with 13, and she gets 15 rebounds. Now listen to this stat right here. Her career high in rebounds going into this game was 7. And 7 of her 15 boards in this game were offensive. She just inserted herself into the game, especially when you're down Meg Newman, who's obviously a major part of the front court, as Michelle Ojo kind of figures out, playing in a high major system, because she was good at Delaware, don't get me wrong, but she just, now that she's kind of got the starting 5 role as hers for the foreseeable future, she's going to have to work her way into that and just kind of get more comfortable. So as she does that, it was really good to see Nataya Nelson, kind of really emerge as somebody who has the confidence of coming off a back half of the freshman year that was really good. And as Michelle Ojo was also able to step in and contribute, 7 points, 8 boards, 4 assists of her own, she had a really good game as well. So I think what you're seeing is that the absence of some of these lead guards and these lead forwards is helping the team come together and really get the confidence for when everybody comes back. Hopefully when everybody comes back, you're going to have a much deeper team than I think people are expecting from the DePaul women in year 1 under Jill Pizzotti.
Yeah, and I just think, last year was kind of a fluke because of Jory Allen, because of just how good Jory Allen was. Never really got to see the other pieces. You knew Meg was good. You knew Kate was good when she was healthy. But everything else Taylor Johnson-Matthews obviously really good. But there's kind of just a question mark about what else is there. Because we didn't really know. We never really found out because, again, you're going to play through your best players. That's what they did, and through no faults of their own. But now we're starting to see what they saw, and it just kind of makes me wonder, just imagine what last year could have been like had, Allie Tim stayed healthy, Elena West not been hurt.
Had Kate Clark played the entire season, so that as well.
Right, and I think, again, they played Valparaiso, they handled business. It's just one of those things. If you're DePaul, again, in a Big East on the women's side, which I think, according to a lot of the coaches, and you and I also think that outside of UConn, it's who knows? Anything can happen. Marquette obviously it's played really well. They play them on December 4th. But it's just one of those things where it's like, I like where DePaul's at early. Again, will it continue? I'm not sure. But I certainly like kind of where things are at early here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the Milwaukee game, to be clear, that was a game that obviously you and I left, I don't want to say concern's the wrong word, but just a little bit maybe wary of where his team was at, kind of as they went into some of the easier portions of the schedule. But, I mean, they alleviated a vast majority of those concerns for me, when they played this game. I think maybe one thing that I think they probably would need to tighten up is some of the two-point shooting, because in that first half, they were 16 of 50 from the field, and then they ended up being, I believe, 23 of 38 in that second half. So they really picked it up. Obviously, Ali Tim shooting and Natalia Nelson shooting and Kate Novick as well, who, real quick, she had 19 points, 6 assists, 3 steals, 3 rebounds of her own. So she is also stuff on the stat sheet. You've got a bunch of players who are really dynamic and able to contribute to the game in multiple ways. And so I think that's going to help this team kind of come together, figure out who each other is, allocate roles, and just kind of, brace for once Meg Newman and Kate Clark and Izanique and Devin and Shakara are able to come back at various points throughout the year. You'll have a team that looks a lot more complete than it did at any point last year, because you don't have 4 players who are basically out for the entire season.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree.
Yeah, so I think on that note, we'll be back next Tuesday to break down the Stonehill game and preview what should be an exciting matchup against Buffalo. And then Northwestern time, Nick, it's almost here. We are 8 days out from Northwestern.
I'm not a huge look ahead game, but I can't wait for November 14th. I just want to see a good non-conference basketball game in front of me with a good crowd, good energy, Friday night hoops, true TV, primetime window. Like, come on, let's just get me to 8 days from now.
Got to get through Stonehill and Buffalo first. Nick, always a pleasure. Look forward to talking next time. Once again, want to shout out Big East Energy for everything they're doing to promote the conference and for having us on. We look forward to bringing you another episode on Tuesday. And until then, Nick, see you later.
So long, everybody.